Hello, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me. If you can, put a thumbs up in the chat room. Looks like we still have a few more people coming through. Oh, looks like we have a few thumbs up. I have a really interesting conversation queued up for us today. And it looks like we have a few more people coming in. We'll give it a few minutes. Actually, we'll give it 1 minute and then we'll get everything started. And also, just a heads up, this afternoon's lab, we are looking for a volunteer. So if you are interested in going through a mock interview, it's going to be closer to a lead code easy. More specifically, with the skill set around Python would be great. But if anyone is interested in volunteering, drop your name inside of the chat room and I will consider you to bring you up to stage. It looks like Kevin's already willing. Looks like he's the first one. But we will see how if anyone else jumps in. But definitely, Kevin, I appreciate you raising your hand or volunteering. You're the first one. All right, I just submitted the last few students that were in the waiting room. Let me see if I can turn off the waiting room. Let's see participants. All right, so I turned off the waiting room and everyone that comes, if you go out and come back in, you shouldn't have a problem getting back in. And we are going to jump into our conversation. It looks like we have a few people volunteered. Kevin, looks like you're the first one. Real quick, Kevin, come up on stage and say hi. Let me turn my camera on. There we go. There goes my camera. Can you all see me?
Hi.
Hey, Kevin. All right. So we will jump into our slide deck here. There will be an opportunity for your assistance in volunteering and helping solve a problem in coding. But more specifically, we're going to go through a deck that I have here. And let me see if I can get it going. Everyone, give me a thumbs up if you can see my slide deck.
Yeah, you can see it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Minimize this, and it should be loading. We're going to jump into our talk. All right, actually, let me come back out and let me give everybody a chance. Number one, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Bobby Dorless. I have a slide deck to give you some more context around who I am. And if this is the first time I'm meeting you, very much enjoy meeting you. I'm in a room that has this really cool neon light in it. So I'm kind of a little different color today. It's actually kind of cool. But they shouldn't bother me in terms of talking about our subject today, which is a live coding exercise. Initially with a CodePath alum, but I actually have a really good, cool treat for you all because we've had some engineers come to the Career Lab or to the Career Center and host a few courses with us. And there's one from a fellow by the name of Anthony DeMays kind of showing us some skill sets around preparing for technical interviews and ultimately answer a question, but showcase the skill set that we're looking for. Today's topic, live coding exercise. We're going to have Kevin volunteer. Thank you so much, Kevin. Which we're going to actually go through a mock interview question that I usually use when you come and have a one-on-one with me, but it has a little twist on it. And definitely looking forward for audience participation and supporting this. All right. So we're going to kick off our slide deck and we're going to walk through our topic here. And definitely, as I mentioned before, thank you all so much for getting here on time. And we're going to jump right into it. All right. So my name is Bobby Dorless, and I'm the technical interview career coach here at CodePath. I'm actually been in the field of engineering for a number of years. If you haven't had a chance to get on my calendar, I do look forward to meeting you all. I'll drop that at the end where you can schedule some time with me, where I do one-on-ones talking about technology, talking about interviewing, talking about tech, and anything and everything in between. Because I've been in the field of engineering since 2002. I worked at this really cool social media company. And if you want to come and talk even more about it, that's also something that we could do is talk about my time working at Twitter, becoming a senior staff engineer there, primarily with the skill sets of systems engineer, but also software engineering. basically managing large-scale systems to make a reliable system at Twitter. So definitely look forward to those conversations. But more specifically, skill set-wise, what programming language I'm most proficient at is Python, Golang, and Bash. And that's actually a cool trivia question. So everybody, when you get a chance, drop inside the chat room because I want to see what programming language everyone's familiar with. So put in your most proficient programming language in the chat. And Kevin's already on this for Python, but everyone's what programming you all are familiar with. So I can give you a number. Any programs? Can you all read? Okay. I got connected. Sorry how far along connected. Are you all still here? What's up?
Yes, I think Bobby, your mic's cutting out a little bit.
Oh. Yeah, I think I'm actually having some internet connection issues here. So I do apologize. Does my mic sound a little bit better now?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, a few people say yes. So I'm going to continue, and I do apologize for the disconnect. But my first question was for you all, is what programming language you all are most proficient at? So inside the chat room, drop in there your most proficient programming language. Awesome. It looks like we have some Python, some Java. Java's popped up. Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to go back a slide and back to the chat. Yeah, it looks like Java, Python, and a few different programming languages, C++, Bash. Yeah, big shout outs to Python and Java has been one of the most used programming language that I've had candidates successfully get through the interview process. Python being the one that's the most, Java being second, Python being more of a kind of phonic language. You don't really have to worry about the syntax, curly braces, and semicolon. And then obviously Java on the end of being a very typed language. So skill set wise, just make sure that you're showcasing those skill sets when you're interviewing. Looks like somebody's mic came on. Can everybody just mute your mic? All right, next slide. So the Career Center offers a few services if you're not familiar with it. We offer mentorship, a virtual career lab, resource guides, internships, opportunities, from some fellowship, and obviously networking. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the Career Center, obviously you're here because of the Career Center, but definitely check out all the resources that we offer at the Career Center. Now, more specifically, we are looking for a volunteer. And Kevin, just give me another thumbs up that we're still good for you to come up on stage in a little bit and volunteer with us, right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Roger that. All right. So one of the things that I mostly run into, especially when cohorts are thinking about coding, and actually I'm going to stop my slides and reshare them again because I need to make sure I enable something. It says share speakers, and we're going to share that again. Sorry about that. Is whenever you're getting into an interview, one of the biggest advice that I want to make sure I convey to you all is that during the interview process, ensure that you have a clear understanding of the problem before you attempt to write code. Now, most of the time when code candidates get into an interview process, they think that the first thing is to jump and write code. And I want to preference you to slow that throttle down a little bit. Because the first step of actually coding is really just more or less understanding the problem and ensuring that you have the right iteration in terms of iterating through potential solutions before you actually start to write the problem. Now, there's this really cool strategy, and inside the chat room, I want you to all put a +1 if you've heard of it. So if you've heard of the umpire strategy, put a +1 in the chat room and let me know that you've heard of the umpire strategy. Yeah, it definitely looks like a few of you have. Now, the umpire strategy is extremely important for you all to consider when you're interviewing. I have my own personal opinion about the umpire strategy. I think it is a little lengthy, but foundationally, it has some very key points, such as documenting your understanding of the problem, matching in terms of patterns. This one that I kind of skip sometimes, but also planning, pseudocode. Do I have the link to this? Yes, I definitely have the link, and I'll drop it in there. Somebody else in the room has the link to the umpire strategy. Definitely send it over, but I will make sure that I include this in the follow-up. But feel free, if anybody knows where the umpire strategy is on Git, just definitely drop it in there. But in general, the umpire strategy really just breaks down the idea of how you develop an answer and not just come out the gate writing code, because it's going to force you to document, match, plan, and then implement. Obviously, reviewing and evaluating afterwards, but the key one that I want to emphasize is making sure that you document your understanding of the problem. Now, while the umpire strategy may be something that you all are familiar with, this is an opportunity for us to actually put it into practice. Umpire strategy. Let me see if I can quickly just drop this in a slide here. Actually, I found the link. So I just dropped it inside of the chat room there. But the umpire strategy is something that I want you all to ensure that you're not just practicing when you're doing mock interviews or you're practicing when you're actually in an interview. I want you to practice the strategy every time you solve a problem, even if you're solving a lead code problem, right? You don't have to write a thesis statement in terms of your understanding. It could just be one comment out of line, defining your understanding, and then iterating through the steps that are listed in the strategy. But one cool thing that we have today, and the next slide that we're about to bring up, is I've had the pleasure of interviewing, or actually going through like a mock interview with a guest a few months ago from a company called Carrot. Brilliant Black Minds, more specifically, is the organization. But Anthony DeMays had a chance to come in and kind of give us a example of mock interviewing. Now, our example that we're going to be following, he's not going to actually write code, but he's going to do all the things that I'm looking forward to you all implementing in your practice before you actually start to write code. So let's just take a real quick listen on this mock interview that I conducted with Anthony a few months ago. And I'm going to press play, but if anybody quickly just in the chat room, give me a thumbs up if the audio is coming through and let me know. All right.
So the next slide that we have is, oh, Anthony, it's that time, bro. We're going to do some practicing here. Okay. Anthony and I are going to, or actually Anthony is going to be interviewing for a position. I'm going to flip the mode real quick and do a mock interview with Anthony. And he's going to help us understand kind of the first beginning of answering a problem or a coding challenge, how you analyze and research, not research, but analyze the solution before you actually start to write code. You ready for it, Anthony?
As ready as I'm gonna be. I stay ready, so I ain't got to get ready.
So I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm just gonna pop into the screen here. And let's just go ahead and switch into mode. And we shouldn't take no more than 5 minutes, whoever's sitting around listening in. All right. So thank you so much, Anthony, for coming in and interviewing at XYZ company for a software engineering position. Today, we're going to be talking about solving an algorithm problem. But before that, give me a quick introduction of yourself and tell me what coding language you're most proficient at.
Hey there. So I'm a software engineer of 20 years, spent 8 years at Google. I specialize on the front end, including TypeScript, React, Node.js, stuff like that. Yeah, and I just really like to solve problems using front end. So excited to be here. I would love it if we could interview in TypeScript, JavaScript, something like that.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you very much for letting me know where your proficiency at and what coding language you prefer us to talk about. Now, our problem that we're going to be solving today, and let me bring up this screen here. If I could quickly find it. There we go. Let me know when you see that screen pop up.
I see it. I see
awesome.
let's practice in a thing. Okay, cool.
Awesome. So today's problem that we're going to solve and review is a challenge that we're having in our environment, defining strings that are anagrams. Strings are integers, and more specifically, a grouping of words or numbers. And what we want to do is, based on the description of what an anagram is being able to find words that have the same length, same characters, but if you reorder them, they can spell different things. If you can see down there, the example of heart can be reordered into earth. But the thing that I want us to cover before we actually start to write code is how would you kind of come up with the ideal solution to be able to solve such a problem?
All right, cool. So just so I can understand and break this down, do you want me to test to see whether two strings are anagrams of each other?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Good. So then whatever solution I write, it just needs to return. I assume it's going to take like two strings, and then I'd need to return true or false if they're anagrams of each other.
Awesome. Well, thank you for asking for some more clarity in the question. What we're actually going to do is pass in a string of words, and what we're going to do is group the words that are actually anagrams of themselves.
Oh, okay. So we're going to take like a stream of words, like say, 51 words or something like that, and then we're gonna group all the words so that all the anagrams are grouped. All the anagrams of a specific word are grouped together. So like in this example, if I had heart, earth, and like flip, I would have two groups. One group that has heart and earth, and then the other that has flip. Do I have that right?
Yep, that sounds perfect.
Okay, dope. All right. So then like, is there a limit to how many of these things I'm going to get? Am I always going to get one? Is it possible that I won't get any strings at all?
Yeah, so you might actually end up getting an empty list, or a list. The length is longest list will be 50 items in that list.
Okay, all right. So I can get between 0 and 50 items in the list. Okay, dope. I understand that. So then at the least, I might return 0 groups, or I might return 50 groups. Does that sound accurate?
That sounds accurate.
Okay, cool. And then do I need to check whether these words are valid or not?
No, we don't need to validate if they're actually real words.
Okay, so hold on. I just need to type some notes in here. We'll receive between 0 to 50 strings, and the strings can contain numbers, right?
Correct.
Okay. Strings may not be dictionary words and may contain letters or numbers. Do I need to worry about like special characters or any weird rules around that?
Nope.
Okay. And then need to return items grouped. All right, cool. So I assume that I'm getting an array of values, right?
Correct.
Okay, so then in what format should I return this? Like intuitively in my mind, I think that returning a dictionary of arrays makes sense, where the key is like, the words that are like some kind of key that groups everything, and then an array of all the values that fit. Or do I need to return like an array of arrays?
We're going to eventually return array of arrays, but I like the way that you're thinking in terms of keys with array values.
Okay, no, I mean array of arrays is perfect. And does that resulting array need to be sorted some kind of a way? Like,
Nope,
do I need to return everything in order of appearance, or does it?
Nope, not at all.
Okay, so I can just group it whichever way. Okay, so return array of arrays. Okay, excellent. I think I have enough. Is it possible to get empty strings?
Is it possible to get empty strings? No, there won't be empty strings. It would be the empty list, or no, it won't have empty strings.
Okay, so each string will have at least one character that I can use for grouping. Okay, cool. So here's, if you don't mind, I'd like to, I would love to run through some examples, if that's fine. We did talk about one with heart, earth, and J, and I think we also talked about if I get an empty list, I should return empty array. So just going back to the heart, earth, and like jazz example.
Mm-hmm.
So if I get, I'm kind of doing it this way. What I should return is heart, earth is going to be in one. It is going to be in the chat, by the way. And then jazz is going to be the other thing. So that would be a valid input and output.
Roger that.
Okay, fantastic. And then if I get this, and if I get an empty array, I'm just gonna return empty. Okay, cool. So I think I know how I would want to do this. Essentially what I want to do is, well, so the first solution that comes to mind is take each word that comes in to my list. I'm going to sort it by letter and by value. So we'll use just a simple ASCII sort. Is ASCII fine, or is this like?
ASCII's perfect.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to take each word, I'm going to sort it in character order. And then I'm going to use a dictionary to start building a grouping of similar words. So when I find something in the dictionary or in my hash map, I'm going to add to that array in the value. And then what I would do is read those values back out of the dictionary to make my array of arrays.
Ooh, thank you so much, Anthony D. Mays. Let's give Anthony D. Mays a round of applause here. Give him one and throw it in the chat with the round of applause, because he even pulled another slick one. He put his notes in the chat room, so y'all know how he thinks. Truly, truly, truly. All right, so we're gonna move.
All right. Let's give Anthony a round of applause in the chat room. I see Jess definitely threw something in there. Let's give Anthony Mays a round of applause for his performance, because this is a set example, a perfect example of the way that I want you all to think about how you're going to solve these problems before you write code. Now, I do want to apologize that I didn't capture his comments, but more specifically, I know you all heard him typing, and you could kind of see the way that his eyes was going from the conversation to his terminal in terms of what he was typing, because the key thing here was he was writing down the edge cases, providing potential, inputs just to test out a theory before he actually wrote code. So definitely, I appreciate all the round of applause. And someone asked me, hey, can I share the link for this full presentation? For sure, afterwards, I'll make sure I have the link here. It's on YouTube, and definitely encourage you all to check it out. We may have some topics that we'll cover similar to our talk today, but probably one of the best videos that we have out there, because we have a real life example. And that's what I want to make sure that you all see for yourself, so that you understand what we are looking for, especially the interviewers, when we're having a collaborative conversation. So before we continue to the next slide, someone drop into there, what is one thing that you noticed that Anthony D. Mays was doing that you are not doing right now? So drop in there, what do you feel like Anthony D. Mays, during that example of him analyzing the problem, documenting it, that you are not doing right now, that you're actually going to include in your practice? Can you send the link again? Yes, I'll definitely send the link for the YouTube, but give me some examples of something that he did that you are going to now introduce into your normal practice. I see some clarifying question, giving examples to the problem, for sure. Another one, asking clarifying questions, asking questions before coding. Great job. Finding the edge cases, right? Imagine you having all the edge cases before you actually start to write code, because that's going to be awesome. Setting up multiple test cases, commenting, and controlling the pace. That's actually really, Mohammed said, controlling the pace. If you notice that his conversation wasn't rushing through trying to get to the console so that he can, or get to an IDE so they can write code, controlling the flow in terms of ensuring he understands the problem, finding ways to provide some pattern matching. And then if you didn't know, he was actually doing some planning. We didn't get to see the pseudo code, but that's basically what he was doing by coming up with those edge cases and test cases. Definitely great answers, everyone. And I really appreciate you all listening in, because he definitely has a great way of solving these problems, and looking forward to everyone utilizing them in their data or each time that they are interviewing. Let me see if I cannot. Sorry about that. Let me go to the next slide.
So the next slide that we have is,
we
Anthony.
are ready for this opportunity to have our volunteer. Kevin, are you still online?
Yes, I am.
Are you still there, Kevin?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
All right. If Kevin is, yep, you here?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Awesome. Yes, I can hear you, Kevin.
Okay, cool.
Definitely. Somebody else also recognized it again here. Appreciate you, Jeff.
Yeah, of course.
So Kevin is your most proficient program. Something, Kevin.
Sorry, didn't quite get that. Do you mind repeating the question? I think you're breaking out a bit, your audio.
Yeah, can you just yourself? Where we're coming from? Up again. I'm going to have give us a little bit of information of what school you're at and what's your most proficient programming language.
So yeah, hello, my name is Kevin. I'm a junior at the University of College Park studying computer science, and my most proficient programming language is Python.
So it looks like I got disconnected again. I do apologize. Kevin, did you announce yourself or give us some
Oh
information
yeah,
about
I can
where
I can do I can do it again if that's okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So yeah, hello, I'm Kevin. I go to the University of College Park. I'm currently a junior, and my most proficient programming language is Python.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. So the first problem that the problem we're going to be looking at today is repeating elements. Now, I'm going to share with you a doc, and if you could drop in the chat room your Gmail account or whatever accounts you have access to right now. If you want to send me a direct message, that's cool too, but let me know what your email account is so I can give you access to the doc we'll be using. But more or less, I'm going to start talking about the problem and definitely encourage everyone to follow along, all right? So while Kevin's working on his email, let me just talk about the problem that we're going to be dealing with today. And the problem statement itself is, given an array of integers, our goal here is to find, find the element that occurs more than once. And if no such element exists, then we will return -1. So before we actually jump into writing code, definitely, if you have any questions, Kevin, feel free to ask them. And definitely send over your Gmail account so I can get you logged into our
My Gmail account. You want me to put it in the chat or?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I just DM'd you my Gmail.
Perfect, perfect. Yes, I did get it.
Awesome.
And what I'm going to do is shift our conversation to the Google Doc. And while you're talking about it, go ahead and feel free. And I'm going to send it to you. Share anyway. And I'm going to copy this. And I just replied back to you with the link. So when you get a chance, just click on the link.
Okay.
All right. Looks like you're in, Kevin.
Okay.
All right, so our problem that we're working on is giving the array of integers, find the first element that occur more than once, and if no element exists, then we'll return a -1. Ideally, your input will be an array of integers as such, and you'll see that we return 3 as the first instance of the duplicate entry. The idea is for you to drop some code in that line below. Feel free to ask any questions that you may have. I'm definitely looking forward to your implementation.
Okay, so given an array of integers, find the first element that occurs more than once. If no such element exists, return -1. Okay, so the input is going to be an array of integers, and we have to find the first element that returns 1. So let's say hypothetically, there are like multiple elements occur in the array more than once, but I will be returning the element that I see first that like occurs once. I'll be returning that. So like I wouldn't have to like worry about the other ones, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so and this is going to be an array of integers, meaning it will just be integers, meaning I won't have to deal with like strings or chars or anything like that. Is that correct?
That's also correct.
Okay, and with respect to like the size of an array, like can I assume that the array is always going to be of at least length 1, like it's never going to be an empty array?
That is correct. It shouldn't be an empty array.
It shouldn't be an empty array, and like any insight you can offer on like how like large the array is, like how many elements will it contain?
Yeah, it shouldn't have no more than 100 elements.
Okay, so no more than 100 elements. I'm just gonna write some comments. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So an array of integers, I'm just gonna no other data types. And then find the first one that return once if more than one element occurs more than once, only return the first one. And array will not be empty, correct?
And that is correct.
So the array will not be empty. Okay. And will not contain more than 100 elements. Okay. Okay, and when it comes to the writing the function, can I assume that it will all be only like that the function will only take one parameter, which is the array then?
That is also correct.
Okay, so I think yeah, I can start with writing the code. So I'm going
Yes,
to be
you are correct. I'm
calling.
not sure if you heard my last comment.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, so I'm going to define a function called get first element, and that is going to be taking a single element, a single parameter of integers. So when it comes to the approach to this problem, I think I have like two ideas in mind. I think perhaps like the first idea that I have in mind is perhaps like creating like a hash map where I have like where I store the integers as the where I store the key as the integers, like the numbers I've visited, and like I can map it to like a specific value, and like to check whether or not an element occurs more than once if I already see that previously this element has already been added to the hash map, then I know, okay, then that is a duplicate, then I can just terminate the algorithm there. But I think that perhaps the downside to that approach would be that perhaps like I probably wouldn't need the value because I know that, okay, each element can only occur once. So basically if I'm checking the keys and I know that, okay, and like in the keys of a hash of a dictionary in Python cannot contain duplicates, then I already know that perhaps that element occurs more than once and I can terminate the algorithm there. So with that said, I think I have another approach in mind, and that is I know that, for example, sets, unlike arrays, cannot contain duplicate values, which means that if I'm currently at a specific index and I see that was previously in my set, then I know that element occurs more than once and I can just return the result there. So like right now, do you have any questions for me?
No, I like the way that you're thinking in terms of the different type of data structure you potentially could use. And I'm looking forward to the implementation.
Okay, so without further ado, yeah, let's get started. So I'm going to be calling this visited. So basically this is going to be keeping track of all the numbers that I've already visited. And unlike arrays, like I said earlier, sets cannot contain duplicate values. So my next idea is going to be looping through this array right here, going through each of the elements. And I will check if the element is in the set. If it is in the set and visited, if it has been visited, then I know that, okay, that this is the first element that occurs more than once. So if that's the case, then I can just return the number there. Otherwise, I will append this number to my set. And so how this works is that in this loop, once the first element was discovered, it would just terminate the algorithm like right there. It will just return the number right on that spot, which means that once all elements have been traversed and this if statement has not been executed, that means that there are no duplicates. And that's when I can return -1 as my result, meaning that no such element exists. So at this point, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, just walk through the code one time with me with one example.
Okay, so is it okay that I use the example above, or do you want me to create my own example?
Let's create a new use case.
Okay. Best case. So let's do for the input -1, 0, 5, -1, 3. Okay, so let's go through this loop right here. So let's say I'm calling get first element on this array right here. So and I initialize my visited set on top. So this is like what like the visited set is going to look like. So basically I initialize the visited set on top and I'm now going through the nums array. So I'm checking if -1 was previously has been visited and it is not visited. So that is going to be added to the visited set right there. And I now go to index to the next element, which is 0. And I see that this is not in my visited set. So I add 0 right there. And I go to the next element, which is 5. That is not in the visited set as well. So I add that to the visited. Then I go to -1 right here. And that is in my visited set. So I return -1 there. And that's when the algorithm terminates. So the output for this should be -1.
Roger that. Awesome. Well, Kevin, I very much appreciate your solution here. I do want to give you one attempt to find out if you have a bug in your code. I would suggest you just walk through line by line and see if you have a bug. And while
Okay.
Kevin's walking through that, if anybody else sees it, drop it in the chat room after he gets to the bottom if he doesn't fix it. So let's see. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is so I start this function by having a visited set, which is empty at first, and I'm going through each of the elements in this array. And if it is in the visited set, which means that it occurs more than once, I terminate the algorithm right there. Otherwise, I add to the visited set. And I continue this until all numbers have been visited. If all the numbers have been visited and this if statement was never executed, then I return -1, meaning that there are no such elements that occur more than once. So I just walk through my algorithm and it doesn't seem to me that there is a bug that I can think of at the moment. But if you like,
No worries. No worries. No
you
worries.
have
Well,
any ideas, yeah, let me know.
well, for sure, for sure. But before we dive into that, let's everybody in the chat room give Kevin a round of applause, please. Round of applause for Kevin. I really do appreciate you feeling brave enough to come up here to showcase the skills. And first of all, we're going to talk about the things you did extremely well, and then we'll also find these bugs that I overstepped. And actually, there's 2 of them. And don't worry about it. We'll walk through it and talk about it. But this is one of the things that I really enjoyed about your solution. Number 1. You spent time outlining your understanding of the problem, but also providing pseudocode on how you're going to implement. Now, in the umpire strategy, we have understanding and planning. Understanding is verbalizing your understanding of the problem and or writing it down. Kevin, no. I see you, Kevin. But understanding the problem and the great things you did in terms of just ultimately commenting out what you want to do, because that's pseudocode. And one of the things that I want to emphasize to everybody in this room about pseudocode is that pseudocode is not real code. When you write pseudocode, just write it out just like you see it right here. If more than one element occurs more than once, then only return the first element. It's so that, and the way that I like to teach my mentees about writing pseudocode is think of it that any programmer can take this code, implement it in Java, implement it in Python, implement it in C++, and that's where pseudocode is really valuable. So take very much this as an example of what Kevin produced, but more specifically, utilize these same mechanisms before you actually start to write code. The second thing that I really enjoyed about Kevin's code is a word called code cleanliness. Now, code cleanliness is writing code so that I can literally copy it from something and paste it into my IDE or paste it into an interpreter and it runs. I truly want to encourage you all when you are giving examples, and I like to do mock interviews inside of Google Docs just to force you to actually show your case, your skill sets around code cleanliness. Because one thing that Google Docs has automatically, hey, it capitalizes letter, and Kevin did a perfect job of backing it out and making sure that it looks like it's code that you can copy and paste. So great job. And the last thing that I want to mention is test cases. Kevin, you did an awesome job coming up with a test case. You actually have a test case that could have been an edge case. And I'm using these two words interchangeably, test case and an edge case. Edge cases are truly your test cases that you want to create. But the edge case that you came up with is, what do I do if I found a negative number? If I think about in terms of questions that could have been asked before you implemented your code, is one like this. When I get a negative number, what do I do? If there should be a negative number returned, and or should I return -1, so on and so forth. But more specifically, just make sure you did a great job coming up with edge cases. But when you stumble upon one, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, ooh, that could have been an edge case for us to talk about, is more or less validating that this is exactly the expected output, and more or less extending the conversation around collaboration. Does that make sense?
Right.
Awesome. Again, give Kevin a big thumbs up and round of applause, because number one, he found one of his bugs, but he also had this bug right here, where you're passing in the argument called ARR, but you're iterating through nums. You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? But it's all right. The cool thing, and the other one was you actually had set here rather than add, right? So I'm actually gonna mark this one as num so we can make that even more, right? Is those two were the bugs that you had. But remember, it's okay for you to write code where you have these minor bugs. Because for me as an engineer, as a technologist, I understand exactly what you're trying to do. Don't let bugs and or having things in your code that you don't know how to implement be a way to stop you from implementing and or getting to a point where you can have a conversation at the end. Because I know what you were trying to do. I understood the flow and definitely want to encourage you to keep at it, because this was a great example. All right. Do you have any questions about my feedback? Any questions about the implementation before we jump back into our slides?
So yeah, based on like my performance here, like is there anything like you would any like advice you would offer me? Like are there like parts where you think are there like some things you thought I could have done like better on? Perhaps like I should have considered like edge cases more, or perhaps like I should have like explained my logic thought process more clearly. Like do you have like some like advice on that part?
So one advice when I ask, so I want you all to hear this, is if an interviewer asks you to do something, and or hey, go and take a look at your code, because I think there might be some bugs in there, or hey, take a look at your code because there might be a better way of you implementing this. Listen to those hints, right? Because at the end you were like, no, I don't think I have any bugs, I'm good to go. But technically I gave you a little hint. And the hint was, hey, dig a little deeper and you would have definitely stumbled upon it. And I know it's a lot of pressure on the interview, and obviously we're practicing right now, so this is a safe space. So don't feel like you're doing anything wrong. It's more or less, when you do get that hint from an interviewer, listen to that hint and keep digging until you find out what they're looking for, right? And if you don't find out, then it's okay, but at least you spent that extra looking at it, because I do think that you were going through the code and maybe even like highlighting it line by line and reading it out loud. You might have caught yourself. But I would definitely encourage you to listen to those hints and chase them down, right? But other than that, you did an awesome job. And I would have definitely moved you on into the next round, because this is simple bugs, right? But you really were able to capture the proficiency that I was looking for this position, and definitely want to encourage you to keep going. All right. So thank you so much, Kevin. And I'll give you another round of applause to everybody. For sure. I'll be sharing this doc afterwards for everyone to, actually, I'm gonna click the button right now, and I'm going to say anybody with this link can view. So I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna chop that in there so you all can have a look at what Kevin worked on. And definitely, there is another to this exercise, which is, I'm just gonna copy that here. And everybody, if you do have some cycles, there's something called unit test. Is to implement unit testing code, and this is more specifically for the Pythoners out here. I know Java has its own testing framework and things like that, but this exercise that I have here is only halfway done. The second half is to write unit tests, similar to what Kevin mentioned up here, but writing unit tests in the lines below. So if you all do have some free time, make a copy of this doc here. And if you are feeling proficient, write some unit tests, testing out those edge cases, send them to me in DM. Just let me know that you want me to take a look at it, and then I'll take a look at your unit test and give you some feedback, all right? And remember, the importance of unit tests is taking edge cases and test cases and finding ways to ensure that your code can execute those specific test cases, all right? So I encourage everybody to take a look at this doc here and definitely reach out when you have a solution you want me to take a look at, all right? All right, we're gonna jump back into the slide here. And let's see. The last thing that I wanna talk before we actually get to a chance to open up the floor for any other questions is more specifically like, what are some tips to succeeding in your coding interview, right? This thing called coding interview requires you, number one, to practice. Just like Kevin and I practice. He gave me an introduction about himself. I gave him a prompt. He told me how he understood it. He also gave us some pseudocode and then wrote an implementation. Is to practice, practice, and practice more, right? Even when you're doing your lead codes, you will more or less want to practice the same strategy so that when it's time to play in the real game, you actually perform the same way, all right? The next thing that I want to also encourage you is keep the momentum going. There may be a time when you're writing code and you're gonna run into something like, oh my gosh, I don't remember what method to call for me to split a string, right? Don't let those challenges stop your momentum. Put a comment there, say, hey, I know I comment the line above, hey, I know I want to use a sorting screen, but I don't know what it is. This is just a placeholder. And then continuing to write your code, get all the way to the end, and then you come back and start to think about how you or what method you need to use and or the implementation. Because I've had a lot of candidates during an interview get stuck on things like when I had Kevin say, hey, he wanted to use the set and he wanted to use the add as a method, that could not remember the add. And that basically stunt their implementation. And at the end of it, we were not able to get code for me to review. So I want to encourage you all to push yourself through, stay on that momentum, and definitely submit code because code complete is also what we're looking for. Code that we can understand your implementation, your strategy, and then continue to iterate. And then the last thing I will mention is the key word that everyone as an engineer should be familiar with, which is iterate. If you didn't know what iterate means, it means that, hey, even after I build a beautiful house, that I can make it better. Iterate, build it, not build it all over, but walk through every room, make adjustments, and iterate. Guess what? I'm going to iterate again and continue to iterate on your code until it's at the level that is expected in terms of performance, but also when your acceptance of code complete and more or less is checking the box. So I want to encourage you to continue to iterate. Other than that, you all are definitely on a path, especially being involved with CodePath, familiar with the umpire strategy, and definitely mock interviewing and different things that we offer here at CodePath to really develop these skills. And I, first of all, want to congratulate you all, but encourage you to continue practicing. All right. Now, this is an opportunity for questions. There looks like there might be a few questions in the chat room. If you're brave enough to come up on stage, feel free to come up on stage and chat with me and ask a question. But I'll read through the questions in the chat room to start us off. And let me stop sharing my screen and we'll pull that back up and I'll open up my camera so that we can chat that way. So if anybody has a question, feel free to come up on stage, raise your hand, turn on your mic and ask a question. But I'm gonna scroll through here to see if there's any questions that I can answer right away. So the first one is there a recording of this? I just joined. Yes, there will be a recording that will publish out afterwards. So definitely look forward to an email. So I'll email everyone afterwards. Thank you for the demo, insights, and all right, somebody was stepping out. I had this question yesterday in OA. Well, congratulations. I hope you were able to get through it very similar to Kevin. All right, that's as far as I'm going to scroll down. And it looks like we have Jessica was at first, and then after Jessica, we'll choose who goes next. Go ahead, Jessica.
Hello. So as we were going through that mock interview problem, and there was the edge case with the -1, I was actually really shocked, and it's just like, it got me thinking, I'm not really good at coming up with edge cases. So is there like a method or like something that could help me with that? Oops, you're muted.
You're muted.
So sorry, I'm over here dropping gems and nobody can hear me. All right, so there's two edge cases that I always like to start off with. Number one, if there isn't data provided or if there isn't valid data. So there's two edge cases. Could you send an array with no values in it? That's an edge case. The next edge case is, hey, if the prompt says we're only going to accept integers, another edge case is, hey, what if we receive things that are not integers? What should we do, right? It's really starting with really small edge cases. And then it's ultimately looking at the problem and saying, all right, if I design a solution that says I need to return the first time that I have an instance of an integer, what if I had a string that was as long as 100, right? And that duplicate wasn't until it's at the end. Does my code support that? Indoor, when does it actually pick up that first instance, right? Having multiple instances of integers that have duplicates, but more specifically, I wanted to make sure it catches the first one. So when I'm thinking of edge cases, is more or less looking at the input and messing up the input in multiple ways, and then what the expected output is. That's the way that I really think of edge cases and really think of them at first, right? There is going to be skill around in terms of practicing these type of behaviors. And if there is something I can encourage you to do is spend some time, and this is probably encouragement for everyone, because this is actually a pro tip, is spend some time developing insights into unit testing. Because unit testing is basically you writing edge cases to prove your code does what you want it to do, right? And as soon as you start to really understand test-driven development, which is a topic that you all may not be familiar with, and you normally see it written like this, TDD, test-driven development, it foundationally starts off with developing use cases, and then those edge cases of your use cases, and ensuring that your code actually supports it. So I definitely want to encourage you to take a look at that. And feel free to hit me up if you have any more follow-up questions, all right? All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you get to choose who's next. We either ask a question or we have somebody come up on stage. Which one, Jessica?
Sure, the next person with their hand raised.
All right. Who was the next person? I did not catch it.
Oh,
Alexander?
Alexander?
Yeah, I think I had my hand up next.
Roger
Thank
that.
you.
Let's go.
So I had a quick question about what the introduction should look like for these technical interviews, because I've given elevator speeches, but I don't know if they're looking at like who are you holistically as a person, or like what specifically is your programming background, like what languages do you like, and what are like I guess how do you make that efficient? What are they looking to hear?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. And I appreciate you asking this because it's a little bit more than just a learning or coding example, but how do you introduce yourself and or the thing that technologists and engineering are looking for. Now, I'm so grateful that this room has at least 20, 30, 50 people in here because I'm going to say something that I hope does not offend you, but really set your mindset where it needs to be when you're talking about yourself or talking about projects. Now, I don't mean to offend when I say this, but as a technologist and interviewer, I really do not care about your projects. I do not care at all about it. What I do care about is the technology that you use to implement your project. And specifically, I want you to lead with technologies that you use to implement your project. And as soon as you change your mindset on that, your elevator pitch and when you're talking about yourself will lead with the technical implementation. Now, as an example, do you know how many tic-tac-toes, how many board games, how many blackjack games, how many rewrites of Twitter and Facebook that I've seen? I really don't care. But when you told me, hey, I actually used React. Actually, I use front end, I use AngularJS this time. Or for back end, I decided to write a Flask API or a Django API. Or, hey, I was writing data and I decided to use MySQL, but then we decided to use a NoSQL instance of Cassandra. That's what we want to hear you talk about is the technology. So if there's any advice that I can recommend you all, is lead with the tech, because there's just so much that you want to include in your elevator pitch about your project that is really irrelevant to our conversation because I want to know what technology you actually use. So hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, yeah. So if they're asking, you could say, for the past 2 years, I've, for example, used Swift on projects using X and Y. I really like using this tech, and this is my most comfortable language or something. Instead of, I really love, I don't know, I love software engineering in general, and I'm a student and whatnot.
For sure, for sure. And the key thing here is that especially if you're like position yourself to mention technologies that the job position is looking for, it's going to be a big up for you. So definitely lead with that. But remember, it's the technology that we're most interested in, and seeing that if you've implemented something that we may be using at the office.
Thank you.
All right. You got to give me either a chat room or someone on stage. And I think actually I'm going to choose for you. We're going to go to the chat room real quick because there looks like there's a few chats. And sorry for those who's raising your hand. We'll get back to you after that. All right. So Mike said, are questions in OA generally harder than what they ask in technical interviewing? All right. So OAs, let's first describe what an OA is. OA is an online assessment that recruiters usually reach out to you all to kind of test your performance or your skill set, sorry. And it's very similar to lead code style questions. Now, always, there's two parameters or two variables that I want you to make sure you consider. Number one, that they're timed. So make sure you stay within the time. And if you can finish sooner, it's even better. And then number two, you want your OA to have, or your submit code to be code complete, meaning that you're passing all of the unit tests. If you do not meet those two parameters, just know that I don't have any insider information, but if I'm a recruiter or if I'm building a system to evaluate engineers, I'm going to take all of the submittals, I'm going to sort the list, and I'm going to say, hey, what engineer that submitted their code actually completed all the unit tests? All right, it's this group. All right, out of that group, who finished within the specified time frame? This amount of group. All right, of the group that finished in the specified time frame, who finished the fastest? Those would be the first people that I call or actually move forward in the interview process. Now, I do not have no insider information. I am more or less just taking it based on my experience so far with a few cohorts that have gone through OAs, but more specifically, just keep that in mind when you're solving these problems, is that, hey, there may not be an individual that looks at your code because a recruiter sends 100 of these emails out. As an engineer myself that used to have to review code for each individual submittal, there was no way that I could do as many as they're submitting out. So just keep that in mind. Now, how difficult are these online assessments? They range from a lead code easy to medium. I have seen some candidates receive really difficult OA assignments or OA requests, but they're usually just one question. I have seen the ones that are more easier or medium ask two questions and obviously having time associated with it. So I would definitely be prepared for online assessments looking similar to lead code, not as difficult as it would be when you come into the office in terms of the initial question that Mike asked, but more specifically, we're trying to measure out who has the proficiency. And then when you come into the office or a Zoom call or code pairing is when we're really going to dive deeper. So it might be a little bit more challenging question. All right. Looks like we got two messages that came in. Based on your experience, the difficulties always depends on the companies. Yeah, it will definitely depend on the company, but more specifically, just be mindful of those two parameters that come up in terms of getting code complete and also within a certain time frame. Now, I did not catch whose hand was raised first. So if you do know that you were next in queue on stage, please turn on your mic and introduce yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, I think it's me.
Roger
Hi,
that.
Bobby. I'm Akira. I'm a sophomore at University of Michigan, and thank you so much for presenting all this. And I got a lot of it. I guess my question is like, I know lead code is definitely important when preparing for recruiting, but how can we also just practice to be a good software engineer? Yeah.
I really, really like that question because even though I'm teaching you all and/or will have strategies around lead coding, there's one thing that I want to make very clear. Lead code is not an example of what it really is being a software engineer. It's only how you're going to get through the door. All right. So remember that And if you know that that's the hustle, then that's what you need to treat lead code as a way to get through the front door, but it's not a representation of what a real software engineer's day-to-day would be. Now, let me give you an example of what a real software engineer day-to-day will be. If you have the opportunity to contribute to an open source project, if you have an opportunity to collaborate with your peers, that's a better representation. And if it's a skill set that I would highly recommend everyone finding a way to get involved, is to find a GitHub project on an open source project on GitHub that you can follow along first. Don't feel like you have to jump in the right code, but eventually building up enough confidence and awareness of what's going in the code base to eventually submit code in terms of fixing a problem or adding a feature. That is a real representation of what it is to be a software engineer. And if you really want to build some proficiency about learning code, right? You're learning by reading other people's code and then adding some features or fixing a bug. That is way better, in my opinion, than lead code. I don't like lead code as a way to gatekeep. And I actually really have, I'm actually working on a blog post to kind of bash the industry around it, because there is a lot of you all great engineers that unfortunately don't do well in those type of scenarios, but are unfortunately being passed up. So I do want to encourage you all to continue to develop these skills around solving these lead code style problems, but don't think, and I'll even give you an example. Of the 20 years that I've worked in tech, I have never had to write a binary shift. I have never had to write a matrix. I have never had to write a queuing system. I have never, ever, ever had to, right? And I don't know why that's a requirement for you to be an engineer. And low key, if I had to, do a lead code to get into a job, I don't even think I would get in, because I just don't, that's not the way that I work. My mind doesn't work that way. And hey, just because I can fix or do this Rubik's Cube doesn't mean that I'm a great engineer. There are other attributes like your personality, your ability to communicate, interpersonal skills, following up, passion, really willing to learn, really have that engineering mindset where we are always dealing with unknown unknowns and we find a way to actually solve problems. So hopefully those words encourage you, and definitely want to let you know that, hey, it is a hustle in terms of getting through the front door. So sharpen those skill sets around lead code, but don't think that that's what your day-to-day is going to be like. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All
I
right.
have a follow-up question. Sorry. Is there a way we can like reach out to you? Is it on Twitter or?
Yeah, so we are going to be at the tail end of our conversation. I know I have at least two more people with their hands up. I do have a cutoff at 5:10 or 5:15. So I'm going to have to take your questions afterwards. But if you are looking to connect, let me first tell you where I'll be found at is on LinkedIn and GitHub. I do have some open source projects that I'm working on, and definitely want to encourage you all to follow along with this journey. But I just dropped in my LinkedIn, so definitely hit me up on LinkedIn. Remember, your network will be your net worth. And it's not now, but as you're going through this journey in this field of engineering, you want to make sure that you're connecting with your peers, and definitely connect, all right? I know that there's two more people's question up there. Send me a direct message, either Slack me or send me an email, and then I'll follow up on your questions. And if there's anybody in the chat room that asked a question that I didn't answer, definitely feel free to reach out. Let me see. Somebody said it's not a question, but I have something to mention about our one-on-one session with Bobby. I was expected on a laptop, blah, blah, blah. I give a lead code. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the feedback. And remember, more green on your GitHub page means that you are playing like a real engineer. So definitely take note to that. And I really want to highlight that in terms of being a cheat code. More green implies that you are really playing like an engineer, and you don't know what that means to somebody like me that's a technologist. So I definitely want to say thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me for the past hour. There will be a recording of our session that you all can check it out further. And remember that mock interview question, if you're up for it, there are some unit tests that you can write to kind of validate some of the stuff that Kevin put in his code. Feel free to tag me on your solution, either send me an email or Slack me, and then I'll provide some feedback that way. And other than that, congratulations, welcome to CodePath, and we look forward to our next conversation, all right? Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Like one minute.